Okay, so AI in education. Chris asked me to put something together. I've done, anybody who remembers me from previous conferences going back a while, I've done, my expertise is around risk, cybersecurity, GDPR and things like that. So I'm taking a very much that sort of approach to the topic area. So who am I? I'm Rick Byers. I'm Chris's brother, brother of DOSBox, as it says on here. I'm the Chief Risk Officer at a company called Fibre Limited. We are a fibre altnet, so we bury fibre optic cables in the road to deliver service to businesses and premises. David Tyndall, who's presenting next, will talk a lot more about that, and I'll be around for the Q&A session as part of that as well, because obviously we're very much involved in the delivery of those services. So I've got over 25 years in data protection. I've been dealing with the Information Commission's Office since the mid-90s when it was first put together. About 96, I think it was first instigated. I've got over 20 years in information and cybersecurity management. I'm currently responsible for all information cybersecurity teams, corporate risk, health and safety, enterprise IT and compliance, and all stuff like that at Freedom Fibre. So I've got quite a wide-ranging portfolio, and one of the more recent things that's dropped on my desk is AI. So I'm also our company's AI officer. I'm also a data protection officer as well, so lots of hats. ISO 27001 certified lead implementer, and our designated AI risk officer within the organization. So I'm not going to really delve into what we do within Freedom Fibre and AI and risk at the moment. We'll touch on some of the areas that we do it, but I think it's important to say here that I'm not an expert on AI because it's such a wide-ranging topic. I know quite a lot about it. I'm a techie guy. I'm interested in the technology and all that sort of stuff and where it intersects with what we do. But I would consider myself being an expert in data protection and GDPR and things like that. And this is, as we'll talk through the presentation today, you'll see how important that's becoming in the sector as a whole. Really, you'll see why in a bit as well. We'll start talking about some horror stories of things that have gone wrong for various companies and what's gone on with that. So first things first, we'll talk about, when we talk about AI, there's an awful lot of different descriptions of AI. So what I'm going to try and do is define what we're talking about in regards to AI today. So artificial intelligence, machine learning, deep learning, neural networks, and all that sort of good stuff. So AI refers to the development of computer systems that can perform tasks that would typically require human intelligence. Now, that level of intelligence within AI systems can vary as it does with people. And again, we'll talk about that in a little while. Machine learning, subset of AI that enables computers to learn without further human intervention. So you teach them to learn, basically. Deep learning, subfield of machine learning that focuses on neural networks, multiple layers, and tries to do a much more effectively trying to develop a human brain in machine form. That's what that's generally described as. And again, neural networks are a further implementation of deep learning. Deep learning is a technology that neural networks use to get better over time. And that then filters up the food chain into an AI system that uses deep learning to develop its neural network and so on. The other half of what we're talking about today is risk. Now, the definition of risk is the effect of uncertainty on objectives. And that's an international standard definition of risk. That's generally accepted what risk is. Now, you'll notice in the definition, it doesn't say anything about whether it's good or bad. It's just the unknown. A risk is something that you don't know what to do with. So it consists of two parts. You can either be positive or negative. So you've got threats that are things that are left untreated will have a negative impact on the business. So if you don't do something about it, something bad may happen. It's not guaranteed, but it may well happen. And an opportunity is something that if you do something about it, you can take advantage of it and it will have a big positive impact. If you don't take advantage of it, nothing much will change. You may lose your position in the marketplace, or you may lose any advantage you might have gained from taking advantage, being able to take advantage of the opportunity. So when we're talking about risk, when I talk about risk, one of my hobby horses is I don't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. It's just a thing that we don't know about and we're trying to deal with it. So AI, where are we today with AI? It's pretty much everywhere. So you see it all the time. It's used behind the scenes in search engines. It's in predictive text on your phone. It's ChatGPT is obviously the big one that's come out in the last year or so. Everybody's talking about ChatGPT. I've called this one the algorithm because that's generally how it's talked about when you go onto any form of social media platform. YouTube is the biggest one, Facebook, even things like Netflix and what have you. There's an algorithm behind the scenes that does something to try and make your experience what the company thinks to be better. Generally what happens is it just gives you more of the same in my experience. So if I watch a particular movie on Netflix, I tend to get recommendations for 57 of the same type of movie, even though I might be in the mood for something else the next day. So I might go from action flick to rom-com, for example. All I get on my suggested feed is a load of action flicks. My missus might not like that, who knows. Digital voice assistants, your Siris of the world, your Alexas and things like that, they are constantly learning by interaction with us and the millions of people around the world that use these devices. Smart home devices, Internet of Things, again, a lot of the devices themselves have got a certain amount of intelligence in them, but a lot of the networks that live behind the scenes that control the devices and monitor them and use the devices are using all the learning from those devices to find out what's going on. So not just home smart devices, but smart devices out in the real world. So traffic management, for example, you've got ANPR cameras everywhere. The motorway network knows how busy certain sections are, and they're constantly plotting what to do with speed limits and smart motorways and things like that. So they're using all that information that's coming in. And myself, I use Waze to find my way as a sat-nav system. That uses a very similar sort of system. It takes all the information from the drivers that are inputting into the system, tells me how I'm going to get to my destination in the most effective way. Enough sat-nav systems, Waze. So at the moment, AI, I was looking the other day, AI is pitched right now as being able to replace an average human. So you put a lot of information into an AI system, and it's going to give you the results an average human would give you, especially in the creative realm. So you go and ask it to type write me a novel in the style of Charles Dickens, about aliens, and it'll give you an average output. There'll be some mistakes in there. It might be a little bit boring, a bit dry, but it's serviceable, but it's nothing special. So humans at the moment, we're still that top 10% tier. We're still managing to hang on to that bit of creativity that we've got there. We're still better at the top end. But what it does show is that a lot of what the everyday work that we do could quite easily be replaced by AI in a lot of times. But we still rule the top end, which is the good news for now. The flip side of that is AI systems are learning at an exponential rate. So as time moves on, they're going to really eat into that top 10% of where we are. And within the next decade, it'll be very hard to tell top human creativity versus top AI creativity. It's really going to be difficult to tell. And at that point, I think we're in for a bit of a cultural revolution. It's happening now, but it's really going to accelerate. So we sort of touched on this a second ago. AI, Brave New World, what's it all about? One of the things I've noticed, again, since ChatGPT hit the headlines end of last year, earlier this year, with a new version of it that works really well, is that it's being used to sell everything. Every advert I see now has got some form of, it uses AI behind the scenes, and whether it does or not, it's a different matter, but everybody seems to be using AI as a massive marketing tool. It's the latest and greatest big thing. So one of the things we need to be aware of is how do we make sure we're not vulnerable to threats that AI might give us. So we're going to talk a little bit about that later on, especially in the context of schools and information within schools. So there are two main directions that threats are going to come from. So the internal threats. So this is probably the biggest one for schools for me, is your data getting out there via an AI system that you haven't realized is in play, or by people just not knowing the dangers of how to utilize an AI system and threats and things like that. Then you've got external threats, which is people outside the organization trying to do something to you. This is where most of my daily life is spent dealing with this sort of thing, because we use a lot of hosted firewall systems in my organization. We use a lot of security operating center type stuff, a lot of threat analysis, and a lot of that is AI driven behind the scenes. So we use a lot of outsourced AI threat intelligence type services. The flip side of that is the opposition have got AI as well. So the opposition uses the AI systems. So there's a large sort of arms race going on at the moment that is, again, it's accelerated a bit like the creativity piece. It's accelerating and making things more difficult for everybody. So it's just something to be aware of, really. That's going to really take off. And a bit like in the early days of viruses, you had virus producers, you had antivirus manufacturers creating antivirus systems. Any of us are old enough to remember when they first came in. Those first couple of years, it was a Wild West. It was just constantly up in the ante every time. We seem to now have come to a position, certainly with antivirus and malware, where it's fairly static. So the defenders are on a par with the attackers, and generally speaking, where things fall down is where human beings get involved. So it's social engineering again. It's somebody actually picked an easy password because the password enforcement wasn't in place on the network, or what have you. So, and again, I can see the same thing happening with AI. It's going to really accelerate up to a level, then it will find a sort of parity at some point. So, down to the meat of what I want to talk about today, the real core of what I want to talk about. This is how do you protect yourselves and your organizations from the threat of AI. or AI threats, should I say, not threat of AI, because it might be an opportunity. The primary rule here, I talk about all things, is AI systems are just systems. They work on inputs, they do some processing, they produce an output. Well, that could be a negative output, it could be a positive output. You might be using AI within the schools to look at certain trends within the student body around, I don't know, latest social sort of thing that's going on. You might be using it for more nefarious purposes, and you've got to be careful about these things. So the simple rule is always follow the data in any system. This relates to AI systems or any other system. I'm particularly talking about here personal data as well, just so I'm clear. I work in industry, commercial data, commercial sensitivity is very important to us. You know, we've got a lot of intellectual property rights and things like that, so we've got to be careful about our corporate data. But the biggest risk factors is still personal data, because the fines are there. Yeah, if some of our corporate IP leaks out into the big bad world, we might lose market share, we might lose a bit of an advantage. However, we're not going to get nobbled with multi-million-pound fines from the Information Commissioner's office, for example. However, lose personal data, that's flipped on its head. We're absolutely on the hook for fines, and I'll give you some horror stories a bit later on to show you what's happened recently within that side of things. So follow the data. So the biggest threat to schools is data leakage, especially with personal data. It's not just schools, any public body suffers in the same way. You've got an awful lot of people within the organisation who don't understand about security and data security, and I'm talking an IT audience here, which is great. However, the majority of people that work in schools aren't necessarily that IT savvy. It's getting better. It's the same in the health service, it's the same in the government, the same in the civil service. People lose laptops, they put loads of data on a memory stick and lose it somewhere, or it gets stolen, they accidentally post it online. I'm sure we've all got war stories around that area. And so, again, follow the data, protect the data at source, and everything else becomes infinitely easier. Trust me on that one. So, again, even in the AI world, GDPR is king. Currently, through the European Parliament, there's an AI Act going through the European Parliament, which is going to be massively wide-ranging. It covers everything from protection of data, data sets used within AI, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a little while. It talks about social values, about creating AI systems. If you're a development house, you've got to follow these social values and rules. But what they're also very clear on is that this new AI Act that will come on in Europe, there's not one plan for the UK as far as I'm aware at the moment, is going to live alongside the GDPR. So if that AI system processes personal data, the GDPR is absolutely still valid. And again, I'll show you some examples in a bit of things that the various information commissioners around Europe have done to companies who haven't followed the rules, basically. So a good way to think about AI systems is imagine them as a member of staff. So you've got a person in your organization. Will you trust that member of staff with personal data? I'm guessing some you would, some you wouldn't, some you absolutely wouldn't, some absolutely would. What they're doing with the data, who are they talking to about the data, who else might have access to that data, where might it go to? So it all goes back to that first point, to follow the data. So if you think about the AI system as a human being, that's legally how the law treats it at the moment. So if your organization uses an AI system, and the AI system does something that breaches a law, be that data protection or any other law, that organization is as responsible as if that was an employee. Doesn't matter if you've outsourced to a company that uses AI systems, it's still your responsibility. So that's something to bear in mind. It's not happening a lot at the moment, but I'll give you some little ideas in a minute how you can protect yourself from that. But it's certainly becoming a bigger thing. And again, the next threat after the direct loss of data really is that of automated systems. So imagine if your school who has entry selection criteria for pupils, and you have an AI system that does that entry selection criteria, or imagine if you're an organization who uses an AI system to sort through CVs. You've got job applicants coming in and sorting through CVs. Lots of different laws there about fairness, equality, all that sort of thing. With the education sector, you've probably also got a whole level of rules and regulations above that you also need to combine with. What happens if that AI system that you utilize doesn't have a sufficiently big data set? It'll learn, but it'll only learn off faulty data. So AI they're only like people. They're only as clever as the information that you feed into them. So if you feed faulty information or incomplete information in, the system's going to give you faulty results. Crap in, crap out, basically. Pardon my French. We'll get censored on the internet for that, do we? Oh, that's all right. Garbage in, garbage out for our American friends. So that's one of the things that's really started to happen a lot. So one of the stories I'll talk about later on is, well, I'll tell you about it now, in fact, is the Microsoft's TAY system was put online in 2016. It was one of the very, very early iterations of self-learning AI system, and they linked it into Twitter. They thought they had the great idea, we'll get Twitter to train this system on how to interact with people. Some people may already know this story. The Twitter trolls got light of this, and they hammered TAY to such an extent that within 24 hours, Microsoft had to take it down because it became a misogynistic, racist, utterly horrible, homophobic piece of horribleness. And important lessons were learned from that. You know, again, a system will train it to be what you train it to be. If you train it to be terrible, it will be terrible. If you train it to be incomplete, it will be incomplete. Again, that doesn't remove the responsibility of your organizations being responsible for that AI, as if it was a member of staff. So, and another good one of this is that the Italian Information Commissioner has blocked ChatGPT in Italy, simply because the massive high volumes of data in there, and it's found a lot of false information within the data set within ChatGPT. So if you use ChatGPT for something, the Italian Data Commissioner's gone, Information Commissioner's looked at it and gone, we can't trust the results. They're not right. The information, the data set's not complete. It doesn't take into account various things. It's got too much data in there. There's a lot of personal data in there. There's a lot of personal data in there of minors. So they're taking the view that it's banned. ChatGPT is banned by the Italian Information Commissioner. So, other things to consider. We talked about this before. You still need to obey the law, especially the GDPR. And we have our own UK GDPR now since we left Europe. It's pretty much similar as the European one. There's an addendum, a change to that going through the government parliament at the moment. That's probably going to be due out next year. It's not really going to change the basic principles of things. It's going to change some things around the edges, though, I think. So again, we've still got to follow the 7 principles of data protection. It's got to be lawful, fair, transparent. Purpose has got to be limited. So you can't collect data for one purpose and use it for another. You can only hold the minimum amount of data you need to do that particular task. So you can't go data harvesting. Again, if you think you want to use your pupils' data to train an AI system in-house so it's actually secured away, you need informed consent. People need to know about it up front, and they need to have actively said, I'm fine with that. I got a letter off the NHS a couple of years ago. They wanted to do something similar with the NHS. They're asking me if I'm happy for my health data to be used anonymized within a much larger study to try and do some predictive analysis for the future. That's informed consent. I knew what they were going to do with it. I knew what data they were using, and I knew what the outcome was, what they were looking for. Data's going to be accurate. Storage limitation. You can only hold it for the period of time that's appropriate for the data. So if you've got pupils going through the school, how long after that pupil leaves the school do you hold that data for? Now, some of that is regulated by law. A lot of financial information has got to be held for 10 years and things like that. Some of it's held for good reason. So, for example, if an employee, if a teacher left the school or an employee left the school, you've got 6 years to bring a claim in an employment tribunal. So it's very incumbent on the organisation to keep those personnel records for 6 years. In case in 5.5 years' time, somebody brings a claim to a tribunal saying that they were unfairly treated and their, I don't know, their personal appraisals were done in a very aggressive, discriminatory manner. If the school's got no record of that, it's very hard to defend against it. You can't show it. So storage limitation is the important thing here. But again, if you give data out to an AI system, you know, an open source AI system on the web, ChatGPT, for example, you've lost control. You've no say in when that data gets removed or how it's looked after or anything like that. Obviously, integrity and confidentiality of the data. Where's it being kept? What legal jurisdictions is it in? Again, because we've become so used to online cloud-based systems these days, you've got to remember, people assume the cloud's this sort of place that doesn't exist. It's just an ethereal thing. It's not. Cloud is just a whole bunch of data centers around the world that live in legal jurisdictions. So I know from negotiating with people like Amazon Web Services and Microsoft that you can tell them where you want your data to live. So you can make sure it resides within, you know, a data set within the UK, within the EEA, wherever you like, depending on the type of data. If you're using a system provided by a third party, that's an important question to ask. And they're holding your personal data. Where is that data? What legal jurisdiction is it in? Are we allowed to store it there? Because again, the school's on the hook. If there's a problem, if it's only stored in a country, I don't know, China, for example. Let's pick on China, because everybody can pick on China at the moment. They're the local bad guy. Stored in China. China's got no data protection laws. There's no reciprocal arrangement that says that the data protection laws over there are as good as they are in Europe. Therefore, without special contracts, you can't keep data in China. I could substitute China for the USA at the moment, because again, without special contracts, you can't keep the data in the USA either. That data gets leaked, you're on the hook. It's as simple as that. And finally, accountability. Who's held accountable for that data? Well, data controller is the accountable party. Data processors can be held accountable, but if you're contracted to an organisation that doesn't have any presence in the UK, UK law can't impact it. So you're on the hook again. That's the important thing there. So, next. Okay. So what can we do? Well, more specifically, what can you do? What do I do in my daily job to sort of minimize that level of risk? First things first, we use the tools that we already have. So data protection impact assessments, risk assessments, things like that, very important. I spend an awful lot of time working with my procurement department within the organization, looking at new contracts, and all the time we're putting new questions into the onboarding documentation for these people. Do you use AI systems? How are they used? You know, is this company going to have access to our personal data, or is it just corporate data? Where is the AI system that you're using? Is it in-house? Is it a web-based one? All that sort of good stuff, questions to ask. And we can do an impact assessment off the back of that. Again, like I say, be careful on board suppliers. Ask specific questions of them. Are you using AI? Because a lot of times the suppliers don't necessarily think they are, but they may well be behind the scenes. Do you use AI systems as part of this service? If so, what are they? How do they work? Again, understand where your data is going. So you've contracted to a third party. Okay, you're using the system, brilliant. Where's my data stored? We're giving you personal data. We've got to comply with GDPR. Where is my data? And if you can, you know, use standards. I'll talk about some standards in a minute, but there are, I think, 3 or 4 ISO standards around AI at the moment. Some of them around AI governance, which I'll give you some links for on the slides at the end of the presentation. I think the slides are going to be available on the site, I think, wherever Chris decided. Chris, yeah, slides on the site afterwards, or tomorrow, or whenever I send them to you. Yeah, okay. Slides will be available, links will be there, and I'll have some contact details from me on here, so if anybody wants you to reach out to me specifically and ask a question, feel free. More than happy to respond. Again, exploit the opportunities where they arise. Can you find, is there a system there that looks like it could do something really good for the school? It's going to save you an awful lot of time, make something a lot quicker, automate a really boring, repetitive job. You know, use it where it's practical to use it. Don't be afraid of it, just be aware of it, really. And then again, help others exploit the opportunities. So we're talking here, especially within the school environment, about the educators within the school, the teachers, the staff who are interfacing with the pupils every day, teaching the pupils. You know, personalized adaptive learning systems will be the norm in 10 years. That's my prediction, not anybody else's. But looking at the direction of travel. Because education now is moving more online, so since COVID and lockdown, people are much more used to interacting with learning management systems online, things like that. And a lot of those are going to be tailored using AI going forwards. So the AI system will look at a pupil's needs, their abilities, will tailor a program specific to that individual, whereas at the moment, that sort of lesson planning is usually done at a class-based basis. In the future, that's going to be very much on a personal level, and it's going to be a lot easier to deliver and a lot quicker to do. I'll hold my hand up cheating today. I've got a couple of slide decks in there when I was putting this presentation together. First thing I did was go to one of the online AI presentation things and type in AI in education and see what presentation it gave me. So I've got some interesting results. They're fairly generic, but going back to that thing we were talking about earlier on, where at the moment AI is, you know, the average of an average person. What it gave was adequate. It wasn't particularly spectacular, but it was certainly doable. I stole some of the ideas from it, left some of the others behind. You know, it's a tool. You treat it as a tool, use it as a tool. Again, educate the organization. So, like I said before, I'm the appointed AI officer within Freedom Fibre, and we've selected a team of people who are interested in AI that we meet up every so often. Our job is to educate the organization on AI. So we find people who've got a passion for AI, or in all the different departments, whether that's people digging holes in the road. Some of them are really interested in AI. Some of our civils guys, whether it's somebody in the accounts department, HR, IT, wherever. We've got about 8 of us get together about once every 2 months, discuss what AI systems are coming on board, what AI initiatives do we want to employ, how do we want to train people about AI within the organization, how can we raise awareness about it. So just build something from the ground up. Don't wait for somebody else to come and tell you how to do it, because chances are they won't, and by the time you need to know how to do it, it'll be too late. It'll sailed. And again, help the teaching staff to spot AI misuse. We've all heard of ChatGPT creating essays for people. You type, I need an essay on Emily Bronte, please, 250 words, go. How can you help the staff spot that sort of thing? How can you educate them on its use? How can you be proactive about making it a positive thing rather than a negative thing? And again, educating the staff on where AI sits at the moment in terms of its ability to deliver a quality output might be useful. So, teaching a member of staff that if all of a sudden all the lower achievement of your English Lit class suddenly producing well above average work for that individual, that might be a sign that they're using some AI systems behind the scenes, or they might be buying the homework off the guy next door. Who knows? All AI is doing is replacing the old style of cheating and giving you a newer, more efficient method of cheating. Certainly in that respect, anyway. So, further sources of help. I said the slides will be out here. They're all links to various websites and bits and pieces in here. The Information Commissioner's Office got a lot of stuff. My LinkedIn profile's there. I am on EduGeek. My handle is Drummerboy. Can't get in at the moment because I'm waiting for a password reset. Tech support. Well, I clicked the button that says reset my password and it said somebody will be in touch. Anyway, so I was going to give some war stories, wasn't I, about this sort of stuff. So there's a couple of them here that we've come across. The biggest one on AI at the moment is a company in America called Clearview. Clearview's raison d'etre, the whole purpose of an organization is to store facial images. Depending on which website you read, they've got somewhere between 10 and 20 billion facial images that they've harvested off the internet. They've gone out and pulled them off Facebook and public site, LinkedIn, or wherever. They have a database. And if you think about that, 20 billion faces, sorry, that's 3.5 times the population of the Earth at the moment. So they've got your face. They've probably got several iterations of your face and, a whole bunch of historical figures as well. Now, across Europe, the UK ICO last year fined them 7.5 million quid. 7.5 million quid. French Information Commissioner fined them 20 million euros. So did the Greek Information Commissioner and the Italian Information Commissioner. So when AI system gets misused, the various data protection organizations around Europe are not afraid to use the teeth. So that's a total of, nearly 70 million quid in fines straight away. That's just one organization in Europe. I've no idea what they've done about it. I'm sure they're probably appealing the fines, because I know I would if I was hit with 70 million quid with the fines. There's some humorous stories about AI as well. So a couple of years ago, during a match in Scotland, funnily enough, in 2020, I think Caledonian Thistle versus Ayr United. I'm sure Sean probably more aware of those teams than I am. They had AI-operated cameras, sort of following, cameras that follow the action in football. They had a bold linesman. The camera thought the linesman's head was the football and followed him for the rest of the match. So let's be careful out there. So if you're follically challenged, don't hang around football matches. You might be on camera more than you think. And then going back to that thing we talked about before about limited data sets, the NHS had a problem during COVID and lockdown. They were tabulating all the various stats for COVID, put them into a spreadsheet, importing them into an AI engine to do a lot of wonderful analysis on it, but forgot that Excel's got limitations. You've only got 1 million lines, 16,000 columns. Notice we've got more than 1 million people in the UK, and so it only did analysis on 1 million out of the 5-6 million records they thought they were inputting. So they ended up with skewed results. So again, garbage in, garbage out. At the end of the day, it always comes down to human being having to check systems at the moment, make sure we know what we're doing, and handle it that way. So that is it for me today. So, open for questions, I guess. I'm going to be around till mid-afternoon, so if anybody wants to grab me to one side later on, feel free, come say hi. Happy to talk about this or any other sort of data protection issues that you might have any questions about. Yeah.
On ChatGPT, is it right that it's not today? It's like September 21 when the data was put into ChatGPT, and anything beyond there is not.
No, so the question is ChatGPT up to date with its data set? It is, because effectively every time you ask it a question, it returns some more results. It learns. The latest iteration was released, I think version 4 was out, it was last September, so the latest, the one that hit all the news that worked pretty well came out at the end of last year. So, and every time people put information in, it learns a bit more. Because more people are using it, that becomes exponential. It learns off itself after that. So yeah, the data might be up to date, but whether it's accurate or not is a different question. Yeah. Question at the back there, Chris?
Just it's kind of a bit unrelated to this, but it's something else you put right at the start of your job. You said your job is compliance.
Yeah.
Computers in education, what would you see as compliance?
Compliance is generally anything legal related, regulatory, just making sure that the organisation meets its legal needs to protect the organisation, basically. So are we complying with the laws? That could be health and safety, it could be the Education Act, it could be GDPR, it could be anything Financial Disclosure Acts. It's a broad canvas is compliance, unfortunately. Most of my stuff is generally around, because I work in the telecoms industry, it's telecoms regulated compliance, Telecom Security Act stuff I do an awful lot on. Health and safety, because it falls under me. Are we complying with all the health and safety legislation that we need to? Are we up to date with what's going on? Part of the role is educating the organisation when things get changed. So I've subscribed to a million different services that tell me every month which ISO standards have changed, which bits of law have changed, and what's coming down the pipeline. And it varies across the country as well, which elements of the country are on. So England and Wales gets one lot of regulations. Scotland gets a different set in some areas, same in other areas. Northern Ireland, the same thing as well. So yeah, that's generally what compliance is. It's, are we complying with anything and everything, really? Any more? Oh, thanks for all your time today.
I do have one.
Oh,
and it's just following on from what you're saying about the whole GDPR and data protection, is as a lot of the AI is cloud-based, and would it be fair to say it is a shared service? So when you're talking to AI, you're not talking to your individual little session, you're talking to a central AI.
I hate answering the question with it depends, but it depends. The open source one, ChatGPT, is a shared service. So again, going back to what I was saying before about the AI group we've got internally within my organization, one of the things we look at is if we're going to use a shared service like that for our benefit, so our marketing team uses ChatGPT a lot to create content, for example, to use it to summarize reports and stuff like that, we make sure that we're not putting commercially sensitive information into ChatGPT, because effectively, any results we get out, our competitors can also put the same question in and benefit from our work that we've done. They might not see our data directly, but they'll certainly get the output that our data generated. So yeah, so a lot of them are open. So the open source ones are generally done on the basis that all information is shared. It might be anonymized, it might be sanitized, but it all goes into the big pot of data that's helped to feed the system, really.
So basically, don't put anything sensitive into there at all, even personal, like you say, personal information.
I certainly won't put any
whatever.
personal data in a publicly available system, no. Absolutely. Not without anonymizing it first properly, that it can't be reverse engineered. Come on, more questions.
Just a general one, really, for I guess the delegates, just on hands up, really. How many people would either, if we have two camps of embrace AI in your institution or trying to suppress it or control it? So show of hands first for who embraces it within their organisation.
Yeah.
What about who doesn't and who's resistant of it and tries to control it?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's as with all things, it's a case of not being averse to it. It's just being aware of it. So I just keep saying within my organisation, my mantra is risk aware, not risk averse. So I need to know where stuff is so I can control the source data mostly. But we want to take advantage of new things. You get a lot of advantage for using new technologies. If we didn't, we wouldn't be using interactive whiteboards. We wouldn't be using the internet. We wouldn't be using half the technologies that we use today. So there's a fine line, and there is a lot of power in being first to be second. If that makes sense. So let the people who've gone to the bleeding edge deal with all the trauma of sorting out the technology so it works. And if you're second on the pitch, generally speaking, you'll get all the advantages with a much reduced pain threshold.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, the reason I asked is my personal take on it is that as education, if you like, in that sector that we work in, our role really is to embrace it, but support our young people with it, because inevitably they're going to be using it in their lives.
They're going to be developing it.
School, future work. So it's about supporting, all about educating and guiding them, mentoring them about the risks and pitfalls and what they can achieve using it, but understanding the world that they're venturing into, I guess.
Yes, that's exactly it. Absolutely. There's another question from the table.
I'd have to say, thank you, Chris, for that, your question, because that actually picked up. I've currently got a ticket open for a member of staff who wants to build use an OpenAI API to create a trust-based AI for generating resources. So the fact that it's still a shared platform in the background, I'm actually going to deny this. I don't personally myself. Very much a hobbyist, and with trust your IT platform as well. I don't trust your intentions at the same time. If it's on personal stuff, fine. But with the fact that we'll be using them, probably using their trust data, yeah, I'm not comfortable with that.
Just feedback on that.
Yeah.
The OpenAI, just what the OpenAI is put into your Microsoft tenancy is only kept data within your tenancy.
Right.
So you can secure.
So I'll use Copilot as well.
Yeah. So you can secure it just within your instance.
Yeah.
So that data does not leak out. That's Microsoft assurances.
Yeah.
Through very early days, but definitely it's working through.
Yeah.
As been said on there, it's with GDPR compliance.
Yeah.
The DPIA.
Yes,
How are you going to do it? How are you going to use it? Where is it going to get stored? Etc. Because as soon as you say, how are you going to get rid of that data once it's in there?
Yeah.
Deletion of data is one of the big things
Yeah.
which we're looking at. We're very nice data sets. How do you make sure that's gone?
Yeah.
Scores and doors, and it's attendance data. Be predictive about etc.
Yeah.
How do we get
If you get it encrypted at source before putting it in,
Yeah.
you get the benefit of the system with a lot less risk and danger.
Yeah.
One of the things that you need to be aware of when using these systems, again, because of the power of AI and the joined upness of it all, is that, for example, a postcode generally isn't considered personal data. Now, there's a warning on the ICO's website recently that in certain AI systems, combining a postcode with other information like ethnic demography of areas and things like that, theoretically, you can derive sensitive personal data from that postcode. So if you've got an area that's 99% one particular demographic, the chances are you're going to know the ethnicity of that person on that postcode. So you've got to be careful. And that's sensitive person. That's just personal data. That's sensitive personal data. So you've got to be really careful with some of these things and think of sort of in a wider context than you would have done historically. IP addresses again are a very good thing around. It's classed as personal data. As a technology person, we wouldn't think of an IP address as personal data, but it absolutely is because it can be used to identify a particular house. And if that house has only got one individual living in it, then yeah, you can identify an individual. Even if it's a family, you can still identify 4, 5, 6 individuals within a particular house. Unless it's your neighbour robbing your Wi-Fi, of course, in which case you've got a different problem. Any more? Thank you all for your time today, then.
Brilliant.
Cheers.